I've been through probably three major burnouts over the course of my life, each time learning and growing stronger as a result. But what I was seeking was a holistic approach to health and well-being because often they're fragmented. It's like mental health is here, high performance is there, emotional intelligence is there, that they're not connected. So much later, after traveling around the world and interviewing many people, I discovered resilience.
Hi, Brad. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspective, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. I have to start out by asking, what does peak performance mean to you?
Peak performance to me is aligned with this idea of antifragility. It's the ability of an organism or an entity to grow stronger as a result of change, challenge, pressure. So some call it resilience 2.0. But it's having the capacity to balance my performance with care so that I can rest, recover, rejuvenate, and re-engage and achieve whatever it is that's important to me. So I really like that idea of anti-fragility as the driver of peak performance.
How did your journey into studying human resilience and well being begin? What were some of the early influences?
So I was always fascinated by human performance and particularly sustainable human performance because we can all have these bursts of high performance, but many people, myself included, subsequently experience burnout. And I've been through probably three major burnouts over the course of my life, each time learning and growing stronger as a result. But I was lucky enough to meet a real leader in the space of employee engagement in Australia back in around about 2000. And we worked together to build a platform that was designed to help people build competencies across health, being, goal setting, financial literacy, and so forth. And it was rolled out across many companies in Australia. And I learned so much about positive psychology, neuroscience, about preventative medicine. So that sparked my interest in all of these different fields. But what I was seeking was a holistic approach to health and well-being because often they're fragmented. It's like mental health is here, high performance is there, emotional intelligence is there, that they're not connected. So much later, after traveling around the world and interviewing many people who I believed were masters of their craft, whether it's a kung fu master or a monk or a business person or an athlete, I discovered resilience. And that led me to the Resilience Institute, where I joined with the founder, Dr. Sven. And I really learned from him what are the elements that support sustainable high performance individually and collectively as a team. And yeah, it was fascinating to discover that there was this whole science of resilience and it was holistic. It includes your mental fitness, your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, and your mental fitness. How do we actually find focus, find flow state in this busy, hyper-connected, often fragmented world? So yeah, that was my introduction to the science of resilience. And ever since I've been fascinated with the topic, I've delivered perhaps over 1,000 workshops to companies around the world.
This idea of holistic wellness, well roundedness, how you're talking about resilience, it's one of those unicorns. Almost always we talk to legitimate champions who have been so hyper focused on one thing, they have lost sight of others. There's only 24 hours in a day, right? How do we go about balancing these things whilst making sure it's not taking away from the time that we dedicate towards the true craft?
It's a good question. And I think in order to be a champion, often you do have to become incredibly narrow-minded. However, they also generally prioritize aspects such as recovery, which we don't always do in the business world. People forget that a good night's rest is important in order to drive performance the next day. So athletes and super high performers often do have a kind of tunnel vision. They block out anything that's a distraction. They've got coaches, they've got a support team that help them to get to where they need to be. And I think we can learn a lot about performance from them, from the way that sports teams work together to review their performance and improve continuously. However, and this led me to the idea of values, is you'll often find an elite sports person has an injury or a setback, or they're no longer, they retire and they feel quite lost. And I've seen this many times. They actually, their identity is completely interwoven with whatever it is that they were doing. So I think that identifying core values can really help, because if what's important to me is, of course, fitness, for example, and positivity, or let's say creativity and kindness. Okay, so now I'm really clear about what's important to me. Which practices will support me in leading a life that is aligned with what's most important. And I think this is where that holistic approach comes in, because there's no right or wrong. Each one of us has to determine or discover what's most important to us, and then weave a web of habits that support us on the journey of life. So, for example, if fitness is really important to me, which habits will I implement each day that support me on that journey of fitness? And the research shows that when I'm acting in alignment with what's most important to me, with what I value, I find my fulfillment increases. And Resilience Institute research from last year showed that the most important factor for supporting high performance is fulfillment, which is fascinating. So that's just stopping every now and then and noticing the good stuff and going, ah, wow, this journey is meaningful. It's worthwhile. I'm enjoying my experience of work and life. My resilience increases dramatically. So there were a few other factors that we discovered in that research. So in first place, the most important factor, fulfillment. In second place is sleep. There we go. It's a very holistic picture. In third place was bounce, the ability to navigate change and challenge and ideally bounce forward rather than back. In fourth place was focus. And in fifth place was relaxation. Now, if you've got those five ingredients in your everyday life, I suggest that you're probably staying calm, you're feeling positive, you've got a clear mind, you're focusing on what matters most. And then if you can apply those principles to those values that are most important to you. So I'm being kind every day, I'm practicing my fitness every day, and I'm being creative every day, you're going to be living a pretty good life.
Almost always in life, we know what to do, but we don't do it for some reason. Like when I
Mm,
was obese, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I need to eat less, stop drinking, and exercise more. And that's the story of millions of people around the world, perhaps billions. If you're
mm,
stuck at a bad job, you know exactly what you need to do. If you're stuck in a bad relationship, you know exactly what you need to do.
yeah.
So almost always knowing what to do is important, but also knowing what not to do is where the real meat and potatoes is. You have interviewed so many people all over the world. You have presented seminars with over 100,000 professionals. Having talked to so many high caliber driven individuals, when you look at all the data in your head, what lessons have they learned? How do you categorize them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are so many lessons that I've learned over the years, both from my own experience and from all of the incredible people that I've interviewed. I suppose an important first one is, and to loop back to your point about why we don't do what we know we should do, it's comfort. And humans, we have a tendency to strive for comfort. Anything that upsets that homeostasis or the stable state is bad. And in fact, our nervous system will start to generate emotions that push us away from anything that feels uncomfortable. So that's the first thing. And as so many people have spoken about, pushing into your discomfort is perhaps the key to a good life. Actually deliberately, intentionally saying, I'm going to do something hard today, something that doesn't feel easy. And you can make this a whole lot easier. You can bypass that resistance through micro habits. So you can just say, okay, I'm not going to run a marathon. I'm really unfit, but I will walk around the house, and I'm going to do that every day until it's a habit. And the old atomic habits approach. And then I'm going to upscale the habits that work for me. And eventually I shift my identity. So I am a runner or whatever it is that I want to be. So I think that's the first one, is just being willing and ready to push through that level of discomfort that we all feel when there's change. And it never stops, right? I don't know about you, Mark, but I know in my own life, I'm always pushing myself slightly further into discomfort. Okay, so how can I run up that mountain and at a slightly faster pace? Or how can I push a little bit more on bench press? Or when I'm surfing, can I go for slightly bigger waves? And even at the age of 46, I'm still finding I can do it. And I realize that soon, maybe it's going to change. The baseline will shift, and what's comfortable now won't be comfortable when I'm 55. But I think it's always the case. You can always grow, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally. We can become better equipped. So there's that aspect. The other thing I've learned is about mindset. How are you viewing the problems, the challenges, the opportunities in your life? Are you operating on a default kind of mode where anything that arrives in my environment is seen as a threat, or is it an opportunity? And that's where cognitive flexibility comes in. How curious are you about the world around you? And if you find yourself resisting or feeling negative emotions, can I just tune into my nervous system's response to challenge and go, okay, that's a little bit of a flight response. I feel anxiety or worry, or, oh, oh, wow, that's a bit of a fight response. I was feeling defensive or resentful or frustrated, or that's a freeze response right now. It's so powerful when I'm in the midst of intensity and I find myself procrastinating. Procrastination is not laziness, it's a freeze response. There's so much potential threat, even though it's not lions and tigers, it's emails and meeting notifications in my environment, that the safest thing to do is just to do nothing or scroll a feed, try and get a little bit of dope, a little bit of relief. So I think being able to tune into how I'm reacting or responding in the moment is critical. That's your insight or self awareness. And then being willing to calm the nervous system deliberately, often through breathing techniques or going outside, whatever coping strategies you've developed, going doing some exercise. But for many, the simplest ways, down regulate the nervous response, breathe out. We always say in resilience training, when in doubt, breathe out, because the long exhalation slows the heart, brings us to a state of coherence. And then ask curiously, what's my next best move? And suddenly you've activated cognitive flexibility. Instead of just going down a default path, you've given yourself more options.
So many wonderful things you said there. The one question that I want to start with is you mentioned you slowly scale up with your habits, and then there's an identity shift. A lot of people are very emotionally attached to the identity they have.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult for them to sometimes give that up, even if they know that it's good for them. When I was obese, my habits were bad. I used to eat a lot. I used to drink a lot. My friends had a lot friend circle who also ate a lot and drank a lot. I didn't hang out with runners. This didn't happen to me, but I've spoken to other people when they are on a fitness journey. There's an identity problem all of a sudden because getting fitter almost always meant I'm not going to fit in with my friends anymore because I can't partake in those habits anymore. And similar things happen when you're at a job or in a relationship. How can we work on this thing? How can we develop ourselves in a way so that we are not so emotionally attached to the identity that was given to us by our parents, by our school systems, by our society, or identity that we've imposed upon ourselves that's really
Mhm.
stopping us from making progress?
Yeah, great question. I ran a session for a group of entrepreneurs last week, and I started off the workshop with the question, who are you? And I just let everyone have a turn to, and it was all labels that other people had given them, which is incredible. I'm a CEO, I'm a brother, I'm a father, I'm a sister, I'm whatever it was, but hardly anyone actually said what's most important to them, or I'm a creative person, or I'm a fit person. And by the end of the workshop, we had re-engineered that so that each person was super clear about what's most important to them. Now, with that identity of I'm a kind person or I'm a empathetic leader or whatever it might be, whatever it is that's important to them, they have that confidence to go out into the world. And of course, you can still honor your old labels, your old friendships. I think that's important. Keep them there. They've been a part of your journey. But in order to evolve and become who you were meant to be, we do sometimes need to make some shifts, spend less time with the people that are not necessarily bringing us down, but not allowing us to grow, spending more time by yourself or more time listening. We've got access to so much wisdom through podcasts, through audiobooks, through Netflix, whatever, more wisdom than ever before, YouTube, and then perhaps trying to find some people who are on a similar journey to you. I love the idea of the hero's journey. And the hero's journey says there's often a reluctant protagonist. There's some kind of challenge, and we all feel that kind of reluctance in your heart that you need to do something great, but getting started is difficult. And then you make that step, you cross the threshold, there's some drama or something calls you to action, and off you go. And you do need some friends along the way. You do need to find some mentors, some people who will help you upgrade your skills. We can find those people on the internet. We can find them on YouTube. Maybe someone's finding them right now with your podcast, Mark. And then we build our skills. We practice. We might fall over a few times, but we've got those friends to help us. We face our obstacle, the dragon, whatever it is in the hero's journey. And then we come back and share the story. And we do the same for someone else. This is the key. Then we are the mentor or the guide or the companion for someone else who's on that journey. And I think of this as a kind of continual loop through the journey of life. And of course, our old friends were there for a reason, right? They helped us. They gave us emotional support at some point during the journey, but perhaps not now. And I've experienced this. I sometimes over the course of my life would make a major geographic shift. I would move somewhere completely new so that I could reinvent myself without being pulled down. In fact, sometimes I was the bad influence on my friends. That's another interesting thing to consider. Once I left and all of my friends became quite healthy after that. The partying stopped. And I was like, that's interesting. Oh, it wasn't them. It was me. I was the bad influence. But making a move enabled me to grow and redefine who it is that I am. And I think that's a really powerful thing to do. You don't have to move geographically, it's not always possible, but just start intentionally spending time in other ways so that you're not practicing just habitual behaviors. Even social connection can be habitual. Stress can be a habit, and it's a bad habit. So sometimes you need to really shift your how you're living, what you're doing, so that you're not practicing stress. Because the more I practice stress, the more it becomes a habit, the more that cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol feels normal, and that becomes my stable comfort zone. So actually being calm and present feels uncomfortable. So you have to unravel those, the habit of stress in order to find calm and focus. So I think just being really aware of it, seeing your life as a continuous hero's journey, and there'll be many loops. And who is it that you're mentoring and helping? And who is it that you need to help you on your journey?
We have known each other for a while and we have realized there's so many commonalities in us. This is another commonality that you and I have, that I too have geographically moved many times.
Mm.
And I look forward to those opportunities because when I go into a new town, a new city, I'm so excited because I feel like it's a fresh page. Nobody here knows who I am. I can completely reinvent myself. None of my baggage comes with me. None of my mistakes come with me. This is time for me to go to the next level. So I truly
Love it.
resonate with what you said. You talked about core values and understanding your core values, finding your core values, depending on how we're going about it, could be the easiest task in the world, or it could be the most difficult task there is.
Yeah.
Because when we think about core values, our gut response is I want to be kind, I want to be loyal, I want to be nice, I want to be, those are just things we spout, right? I got my top five, right? I'm done with the homework. That's the easiest way to go about it. And if everybody went about it, everybody would have the same core values. What is the correct way to go about it?
That's such a good question again. So you're exactly right. A lot of people list ideals, how they would like to be, but that's not necessarily who they are. And as a result, when they're navigating life, oh, but hold on, one of my ideals is kindness, but why am I not able to be kind in this situation? And then you feel this dissonance, and then eventually you go, values are a bunch of junk, and I'll just operate on default mode and try and navigate life. I think there are many ways. And in my new book, I talk about how to discover your values. And there are many different tools because I don't think there's just one process. For some people, they can look back and ask, what brought me fulfillment over the course of my life? Because that's when you've aligned your actions with what's important to you. You start to feel, oh, that was meaningful. That was great. Like when I booked that one-way ticket and landed in India and I spent a year in India, that was one of the best things I've ever done over the course of my life. Now, what was it? What did I value about that? Adventure, freedom, that really just aligned with what's important to me. And that made it an incredible trip of growth and values alignment. So look back to those things that you've done that you're super proud of that bring you fulfillment. Another place to look is flow state. When does time disappear for you? Because when you're in flow, you're matching your skills to a challenge and time seems to disappear. You lose your sense of ego. You're just completely one with the activity. That's another good clue because you've mastered a set of skills that enable you to get into flow. So what are those skills? It was obviously important to you. Then, of course, there are worksheets and other ways of discovering your values, looking through lists. And there are several in my book where you can say, okay, so what I've tried to do is create a values pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, there are survival values, and these will undercut all of the high level aspirational stuff. I can say my value is altruism, but if there's a natural disaster or if my family is struggling in terms of finances or something like that, we revert back to fight, flight, freeze responses most of the time. We just try and survive. So that's at the base of the pyramid. Then there's belonging. How important is it to feel connected to others? And for most of us, that's really important. It's the foundation of many of our well-being. Then we've got growth values. We all want to grow, develop, and improve in some way. Then there are impact values, because once you've practiced something enough, you want to be recognized for it, right? Like you've gone and you've done the work in terms of bodybuilding. Like you want to go in a show and see, how do I actually perform? How do I compare? And then at the very top of the pyramid are fulfillment values, which are things like awe, AWE, like being in an environment where you just go, this is incredible, or self-transcendence. I feel like I've lived a meaningful life and so forth. But at each one of those levels, there are a number of potential values that people can choose if they resonate. And my goal is then to help them get to a point where they've got between 3 and 5 core values, because even 5 can be hard to remember, especially in the midst of an important decision. So I encourage people, once they've discovered their core values, to use them as lenses. So for example, if my core values are kindness, freedom, and creativity. Okay, so now I'm reading my inbox and it's mayhem and I don't know where to focus. I can say, okay, can I be kind in this moment? Can I be creative in this moment? And can I be free, or whatever the other core value is? I can actually be kind to myself. I'll take a little break. And now can I be kind to the people who've taken the time to reach out to me instead of just being annoyed? And you can use them as these dynamic tools through which we view life's challenges. And it can make a huge difference, because now I'm being kind to the people who've emailed me. I'm responding and I'm writing thoughtful messages. And suddenly I feel my own level of energy and well-being increase because I'm aligned with what's important to me. That's how I want to behave. That's who the real me is. So I think discovering, there's many different ways to do it. Looking back to fulfillment, what you're proud of achieving, looking back to what gets you into flow, looking at those levels, belonging, growth, impact, and at the top, fulfillment, really useful. And then be playful, recognizing that values change over the course of your life. When my daughter was born, my values changed overnight, from like freedom, adventure, and fun, or humor, or whatever it was. It changed quite quickly to patience, stability, and kindness. Wow, that was a huge shift. And I know you've experienced this too. And now, as my daughter's 10 years old, it starts going back to some of the core values, such as adventure and freedom. And because I've managed to provide, I've raised someone this far, I think it's all going to be good. So I think being flexible as well over the course of our life, our values can and should change.
Stress. Stress is something, it's a demon that affects everybody. You can't live life without feeling stress in relations, stress in work, stress in jobs, and we're surrounded by stress, right? There are so many stress management books. There's so many stress management tips: meditation, listening to
Mm.
music, going for walks, physical exercise. Once you've read a few of those books, you basically know pretty much every book has the same 10, 12 tactics that they are telling you to use. You are a master of the concept of core values. And I know you help people come up with core values that also helps with stress management. My question to you is, what is the most surprising thing you have discovered about the impact of core values on stress management?
Oh, great. I love this. In my work with resilience, I learned and demonstrated to thousands of people how you can calm your nervous system, how you can bring yourself to a state of coherence. And we do this in workshops. We attach someone to a heart rate monitor. It's super fun. We get a volunteer, they come up, and then we don't tell them what they're going to do yet. And then we ask the group to stress them. Their heart rate's up on the big screen. Everyone's shouting things like, oh, when this client calls, or when that happens, or when this person walks into the office, and you watch them go out of coherence. Heart rate variability is low. They're not in a good place. And then we use breathing techniques. So breathing is fundamental, and of course it works, and it brings people, with a little bit of work, into a state of coherence. You see this beautiful sine curve on the HeartMath software. We use this device called the M Wave from HeartMath. It's great. I knew about that side of it from a resilience perspective, but from a values perspective, how does aligning with your values reduce stress? So I've worked with many people, and especially executives, leadership teams, and once you're super clear about your personal core values, that's foundational. Then there are your collective values within the workplace as well. And it's the same process. It's saying to myself, okay, if we're a company that values innovation, for example, this little challenge, this hiccup has happened. We're going to run late with launching that new product. Now, I can be super stressed about it, or I can ask, can I be innovative in this situation? Bring the team together around this. Okay, guys, looks like we're falling behind, but can we activate our value of innovation in this situation? And this is where having 3 values gives us a bit of flexibility, because we can turn to the others and go, what are our other values? Customer obsession, right? And flexibility. Wonderful. So we've got these 3 core values. Which one can we activate right now in this situation, so that we can focus on what we can actually control, rather than finding ourselves stressed? Often when we're stressed, we don't know where to focus our attention. So we say, okay, let's communicate this really clearly. Customer obsession is important to us. That's one of our core values. Let's make a plan. What can we do right now? We can craft a message to our customers who are waiting for the new update. And we can say, guys, this is what's happened, but we're so obsessed with you and it's going to be an amazing experience and we're going to ensure it's good. These things happen over the course of work and life. There's been some disruptions. Wonderful. Suddenly I'm feeling less stressed because I've got some momentum. I'm actually doing something rather than fragmented attention going all over the place. The other tip I would highly recommend for people is when you are clear about your core values, try and create pockets of time during the day where you can focus on something within your control that aligns with that core value. Hey, everyone, look, we're running late. We're spending a lot of time in Slack and we're spending a lot of time on Teams. What if each one of us just works for half a day on our most important tasks? Turn off all technology. We give you permission. Focus on the one thing that's going to get you the most momentum aligned with one of those values. Okay, we need to innovate or we need to be customer obsessed or whatever it is. And immediately you feel both a sense of control and you're working in alignment with a value, something that's important, and the stress does reduce. You can measure it on heart rate monitors, especially with executives who've got many competing demands. You just want to give people an opportunity to focus on one thing that's within their sphere of control that aligns with what's important to them. And it's even more powerful than saying just breathe, which is one of those standard kind of maxims. Just breathe and everything will be okay. It doesn't necessarily solve all of the world's problems, certainly is a start. The next step is focus on something that you can control. Write down everything that's stressing you out, the old circles of control, the sphere of influence, and then just do the things that you can directly control. And later on, you'll find that gets you momentum. So you start having more influence over the things outside of your control. So values can really help us there because it gives us something that we can use to make those decisions. And as I said before, use them as a kind of pair of spectacles or glasses. Put on your kindness glasses and go, what's one thing I can focus on right now that's within my control? And can I be kind? It'll change your life.
We talked about resilience, talked about what defines a resilient person. What are some misconceptions about resilience, especially in a workplace?
A lot of people think resilience is about grit, just being able to persevere, deal with anything, pushing forward relentlessly. And that's not it at all. I spoke to Professor Tal Ben Shahar on the Resilience podcasts a couple of years ago, and he ran the largest happiness studies course at Harvard University, the most attended class at Harvard University. And we talk about resilience and antifragility, which he calls resilience 2.0. And I said, what's the most important ingredient? And he said, one word. And that one word was rest. If we don't rest and recover, we're not going to stay resilient for very long. Sometimes we need to have a sprint where we're pushing ourselves to the limit. And that's good. Ultimately, when we push ourselves out of discomfort, that's when we grow stronger. And we know this with physical activity. If you go and exercise that muscle, it'll grow stronger. But there's one key driver of that, which is taking time to rest and recover. Otherwise, you'll overtrain and ultimately it's counterproductive. So I think resilience is not just about grit. It's about caring for each other. It's about our emotional intelligence. How connected are we to each other? Are we fighting each other or are we empathetic? Are we able to understand each other's motivations, the different styles on the team? Affiliative leadership is a huge driver of resilience because if I'm a command and conquer kind of leader, yeah, you might get results for a while. Soon enough, you're going to find people spiraling down, feeling burnt out. And that's not resilience. That's definitely not where you want to be. You want to, as a leader, get to know your team, get to know the different styles. Are they logical, analytical? Are they super creative? Are they a people person who needs meetings? Are they a driver who just likes to get things done? Wonderful. Get to know them, get to know what motivates them, get to know what they value, and then use that as a way of influencing them, of aligning them, getting them working together in the best possible way. And I think this is where workshops and training sessions can make a big difference because a lot of people don't even know about emotional intelligence. They're navigating life and every now and then they feel these strong emotions and they're not sure what they mean. Training will help with that. They can go, oh, okay, that's a stress response. Cool. What can I do about it? It gives people this flexibility in the moment. And I think that's what really resilience is all about. It's about self-awareness, insight. It's about mastery, knowing I've got some skills to navigate these changes and challenges and the stress of my life. And it's about empathy, being able to connect and wonder how everyone else is doing. And when we've got those ingredients, man, you're going to have a resilient team.
You spoke about the importance of rest and recovery. When I'm training in the gym, when you're running the hill, our biology will force us to rest and recover. There are
Yeah.
times I am so exhausted. If I wanted to stay up and do some homework on the next podcast that I have coming up on the guest, I'm conking out,
Mhm.
right? But when we're doing mental work, but there is not that much of a biological force that just puts us to sleep. And I must say, rest and recover is something that I suffer from, as evidenced by the fact it's Sunday and I'm working. Almost always, I will do the sprint, and now I know I must rest. But when I'm resting, I'm feeling anxiety, all
Mm.
the other things that I should be doing. My mind is in the future. So, what is a proper way to rest? Do you just sleep? Do you do fun things with your family? Do you watch TV? How does one go about recognizing what works for them?
I think it is quite individual. What works for one person may not necessarily work for the other. And that's sometimes where people get stuck. They'll listen to an episode of the Huberman podcast and say, Andrew Huberman said that I need to do NSDR, non sleep deep rest, for 15 minutes after lunch. And they lie there. It's torture. Oh, why do I have to do this thing that Dr. Huberman told me to do? Be playful, be curious. But ultimately, what most of us want, and this is actually something from Huberman. He said, we shouldn't be asking each other, how are you? We should be asking, how did you sleep? Because that is a really good indicator of your overall level of well being and how stressed you are. So, creating rhythm every day, I think, is important. There are times for peak performance and there are times for recovery and relaxation. And in fact, if you search Google for ultradian rhythms, you'll see there are these natural peaks and troughs. Even during sleep, we've got deep sleep cycles, REM sleep cycles when you're slightly more alert. And then in the morning, you get your first very strong peak of alertness, usually around 8, 9 in the morning. What do most of us do at that time? We're doing emails. We're not actually working on our most important, we're working on our most urgent tasks. So we're responding to emails. And then there's this natural ultradian healing period, which is a dip of attention. And we try and get through that with coffee or urgency or meetings, or there's no choice. We just have to keep going. And we don't actually have this natural rhythm throughout the course of the day. By the time we get to the evening, we're so wound up. Maybe we had a lot of caffeine in the afternoon, or we've had a lot of urgency. We've been in fight flight mode. So we've got high cortisol, high adrenaline, chronic stress. And now we sit down on the sofa. And the only way to turn off the hamster wheel of thoughts is like a half a bottle of wine and Netflix, just to block out the pain and suffering of our mental landscape, because we're never going to be fully done. So I think the first thing is recognizing I'm never going to be done, and it's probably never going to get better than it is right now, and accepting that. I'm a workaholic. I know that about myself. Yeah, I've got my laptop in there and I have to drag it out of the room reluctantly because I know I have to play Barbies with my daughter or whatever. And if the laptop's in the room, I'm going to tinker on it. I'm going to be doing something. I can't stop myself. So being aware of that and creating these rhythms of performance, even on the weekend, I might go, you know what? I value productivity because I do. And I value flow state. So on a Saturday and Sunday morning for an hour, I just let the family know I'm going to be doing some deep work because I love it. I'm not even going to feel guilty about it. What? For the rest of the day or for the afternoon, I'm all yours. Now you feel good because you had that burst of productivity, and then they feel good because they know their boundaries and you can do it. But I haven't answered your question about how do you turn it off and rest and recover. And I think this is the rhythm. We know very well with babies, for example, that a bedtime routine helps them sleep. Not always. My daughter didn't sleep very well for years, but it's better than not having one. At some point in our own lives, we realize or we decide, oh, bedtime routines, that's not for us. I can do whatever I like. I can stay up. I can watch TV. There are no boundaries anymore. 100 years ago, there were real boundaries between day and night. You wouldn't sit up all night. Many people didn't even have electricity. Whereas now we've got the choice. We can turn our environment into an all day environment 24/7 with lots of stimulation from all of these devices and screens. So I think it's about prioritizing rest, easing our way into the evening, putting a yellow light bulb somewhere in your living room. That's a signal for you that it's time to start relaxing. So you turn that on about 8 and turn off all the bright lights in the house. It reduces your blue light exposure, allows you to start releasing melatonin, which is the chemical that eases us into sleep. Maybe do something that you find relaxing, watching a movie or spending some time reading a book. A Kindle's better than an iPad or a phone just because of the blue light exposure, and gradually starting to reduce stimulation. And you're in a nice calm state. I love being super tired because then I'm not hypervigilant. Hypervigilance is one of those factors we found from resilience that really differentiates the highest from the lowest resilient people, because hypervigilant people tend to be always a device. And it's hard because people like us, Mark, we are entrepreneurs. You want to check to see if that exciting deal has landed, or you've got a positive response from someone. So the tendency is to always be on alert. Like, I'll just check one more time, even in the last half hour before bed. But I'm being more and more regimented with myself. From about 90 minutes before bedtime, I don't check my device anymore. And that was a habit that I had to create. And it's been a great one, because there's nothing worse than opening up Teams and looking at like high stress issues that your team members have sent through, and you're about to go to bed. It's not going to help. So I think, as I said, rhythms. There's time for high performance, there's time for recovery, and especially in that last part of the evening, that's a time to just disengage and prepare yourself for quality sleep, because quality sleep is perhaps the most important driver of performance. The next morning, you'll feel way better for it.
Talked a lot about rest, talked a lot about sleep and the importance of sleep. For me personally, if I don't get 8 hours, I'm a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I need more than 8 hours. And that's why the hours that I'm awake, I try to make the most out of it because I'm sleeping so much. There have been times in my life, though, when I watched some YouTube video about some guru, some CEO from some companies, I won't name names because I want your honest opinion, saying, I only sleep 4 hours a day. I only sleep 5 hours a day. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? I'm
Mm-hmm.
strong. I can do this. If these guys are saying that the secret to their success is they just sleep 5 hours a day, and therefore they have 19 hours of work, I want to be there, and I can
Mm-hmm.
never do that. In your honest opinion, in your research, what's your gut feeling? Are they just making stuff up?
Yeah.
Or are they really being honest that they have been sleeping 4 hours a day for decades and they're still functional and they're sane?
Yeah, I've met many people who say that in workshops, because we dedicate at least an hour to sleep and how sleep hygiene and tracking sleep, which can really help people get an aura ring or some kind of wearable so that you can actually measure, because what you measure, you can improve. And I've had so many people push back and say, I sleep 3 hours a night, I sleep 4 hours a night, and I'm great. You dig a little deeper and you find that 99% of the time they're not. They're highly stressed, or they've got metabolic issues, or they have other stressors in their life. Now, the research suggests that there are different perspectives, but maybe around 1% or less of us can survive and be fully productive and effective on less than 5 hours per night. It's just really, sleep is critical. And if we could take sleep in pill form and not a sleeping tablet, we could actually get the benefits of sleep. We would all be on that drug, because it is so powerful. It's profound in terms of our overall well-being. Now, when I've worked with people over long periods and they have fixed their sleep, they go from 4 hours a night to 6 or 7, their entire world changes. They've suddenly got the energy to do stuff that they didn't have before. You can function for a while. You can function. I'm a zombie at 5 hours. It's a nightmare day for me. I can drink so much caffeine, but I'm still not going to be empathetic. I'm still not going to be productive. My focus is all over the place. Now, as soon as you start fixing that, you notice, okay, I've got more energy in my body. I feel more positive. My learning, memory consolidation is a whole lot better. I'm able to focus on what matters most. Life is so different. And we know this when you've actually prioritized sleep. You can look back at some people who have boasted about sleep. Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the UK. Ronald Reagan boasted, we get by on 4 hours of sleep or less per night, and look at how high functioning we are. We're leading countries. Both of them ended up with severe neurodegenerative conditions later in life, because it's during the sleep cycles that the brain flushes out toxins and plaques. The brain gets plaque just like our arteries can. And if we don't do that, eventually we're going to suffer from, whether it's Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something. The brain needs rest. It's during those deep sleep cycles that you get this car wash effect where the brain is being cleansed. And if you don't get enough of that, there will be long-term issues. And I've heard of CEOs having heart attacks at age 49 because they were sleeping 2 hours a night and running marathons and doing everything. Humans can push into discomfort, but I think that rest is the one area where we probably shouldn't do that too much. We should really engage and embrace rest as the wonderful tonic it is for a good life. And that does require unraveling some bad habits, particularly hypervigilance in the evening. It may also be a signal. If I'm super anxious about everything that's going on in my world, maybe there's an opportunity to practice a short meditation and call it something else. If meditation sounds woo and it sounds like it's attached to a set of religious beliefs, don't call it meditation. In fact, at Resilience, we call it tactical focus. The accountants and consultants love that. PwC or Ernst & Young, they go, tactical focus sounds great. How do we do it? It's a meditation, but it's just framed slightly slightly differently. And it's 5 minutes, and I run this in my sessions. Bring yourself to a state of calm. Notice your breathing. Notice your thoughts. Treat your thoughts like clouds floating overhead. Notice the blue sky every now and then. Wonderful. Now, if you can do that in the midst of intensity each day, you can do that at night when you lie down in bed, or on a Sunday afternoon. Something that I've been doing is a Sunday afternoon nap. And I know not everyone can do it. And if you don't fall asleep, that's fine. Non-sleep deep rest, as Huberman says. Just lie there and breathe. But it's so good for you. And I find I wake up after that little nap feeling so energized for the rest of the afternoon. Anxiety is reduced. I'm actually just in the mood for playing Barbies or whatever else it is that my daughter wants me to do. Maybe with a little bit of extra energy left over to do something productive, answer some emails, prepare myself for the week ahead, which I find really increases my enthusiasm and motivation when I've got a bit of a plan for the week. And then making sure that I've got that boundary, that buffer zone in the evening, so that I can start to calm myself, watch some comedy. I really enjoy watching comedy in the evenings because laughter is good for your well-being. You reduce your stress levels, and then easing my way towards bed. Good night's sleep, lock it in. If you wake up in the night, there's breathing techniques such as 4-7-8. So breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8, and bring yourself to that state of calm. You will find that with practice, you can fall asleep again and make it all the way through the night, because waking up in the middle of the night is a real issue for many people. And often it's because they didn't build up enough of a reservoir of melatonin in the last 90 minutes to see them through the night. So they were exposed to lots of blue light, lots of stimulation. They do manage to fall asleep, but then they wake up at 3 a.m. and it's like, oh, the lights are on. Definitely. Here's one tip. Don't turn on bright lights in your room. Try not to look at your phone screen, because it's like a mini sunrise according to your body. And just breathe your way back into another deep sleep cycle, and you'll be thankful that you did. Life changes tremendously.
You have a brand new book coming out called Start with Values. What are the some of the key principles that you explore in this book, and how can readers start to apply it in their daily lives?
So the book, it starts off quite autobiographical. I was wondering whether or not to include this, but the publisher said it's good. It takes you back to my life growing up in South Africa and my travels to the UK and Australia and around Asia and into eventually here to New Zealand. So then it takes you through what are values. Let's get really clear, because are they ideals? Are they morals? Are they beliefs? How does this stuff all fit together? I like to zoom right out in everything I do. So I start off wide. I start with, okay, so what are the values we find in the universe? What are values in living organisms? What are values that have been defined over time? Because for much of history, our values were given to us by whichever religion we or our culture subscribed to. If you were a Christian, you might have learned piety and altruism and whatever. So there are different values that were given to us. So being aware of all of this first, so zooming right out. Then we go on a discovery process to find what your core values are. We do a little junk values audit, because many of us have some junk values. I want recognition. We call those extrinsic values. So I cannot directly control it. There's a gatekeeper, or someone else has to give it to me. My reputation is a good example, or fame is a good example of a potentially junk value. Then, because I don't control it, right? Other people give it to me. So rather do what I really enjoy and make it great. And the fame or the wealth or the prestige will come as a side effect of doing great work aligned with your values. And then we go into how to articulate your values, how to share them with others, how to have a courageous conversation based on your values, using values. Instead of saying, I'm angry with you, I really value collaboration. And in this instance, you behaved in a way that wasn't collaborative. And suddenly we're having a much more engaged conversation. We're not triggering each other's fight flight response, the old amygdala in the brain firing up saying, this person is fighting with me. No, here's how you can have a courageous conversation based on your values. I think we should all be able to do that. I don't see why there is so much polarization in the world based on beliefs rather than values. At the end of the day, most people's values are very aligned. We want to be healthy. We want to feel love. We want to feel joy. There are some kind of universal values that most of us have. So being able to have a conversation based on that. And then some collective values, how to define your relationship values with your spouse, recognizing that we're all different, but what are the overlaps? Creating a family value statement. What does our family stand for? What have we learned from previous generations? And how do we want to interact with the world? And then corporate values. I go into company values, how to set and co-create company values, which is a really fun exercise. And then finally, I finish off with the value of nature stewardship. Like, how can we love and value our planet, this place that we live? And I don't just focus on one type of activism, like we should all focus on climate or we should all focus on biodiversity or something. It's really just adopting that mindset of, hey, what a wonderful place we've been born into in this vast universe, this tiny blue dot orbiting this fusion reactor in space. It's incredible. How can we just look after it to ensure that it's going to be there for future generations? So that's what's inside of the book in a nutshell.
Can you share a moment where your values were tested and how
Yeah.
you navigated around?
Definitely. So there have been many instances. So for me at the moment, the three core values that I think that are most important are creativity, kindness, and fitness. And when I am building my life around those three core values, I feel fulfilled. I feel good. So an injury can knock you out of alignment. Oh, goodness, I've injured my wrist. I was playing on the playground with my daughter, doing something silly. My worst injuries have all come from children's playgrounds with my daughter, not by myself, of course. So climbing down a slide, or we're playing tag on a playground, and my arm got hooked around the slide and I jumped and it remained up there. It was not good. And that meant that I couldn't surf. I could still go running, which was good, but I couldn't do gym, and you really feel it. So that value of fitness was tested. But what I did is I just ensured that I had other outlets, and it was in fact quite good. That's really when I started getting into running, because of course you can run, you just put on a wrist brace and you're all good. So that's one, that's a simple one. Kindness is an interesting one because I find that I feel much better when I'm navigating the world with kindness, creating time for other people, being compassionate, being empathetic, trying to understand what's important to people, and being someone who helps others on their journey. Now, what about when you have these occasions when someone is really annoying and they're on your team and you're finding it extremely difficult to make sense of their behavior, and maybe you start to fight back. And I've been in a Microsoft Teams thread where I'm like, I think that's enough of this behavior. I suggest you stop right now. I suggest that's the last word. And I leave that conversation feeling full of cortisol and adrenaline. I acted completely out of alignment with my values. Could I have done it better? Yeah. Am I going to beat myself up over it? No, but I will use that as a learning experience because I didn't like the feeling. I tuned into those signals of anger, resentment, frustration, and even being a little bit passive aggressive. It's not good. That didn't feel good. So using it as a learning experience, and next time when I notice that pattern might unfold again, just stopping and going, okay, what's important to that person? Remember, they're on a journey of their own life. There are probably things going on that prompt them or trigger them to act in this way or respond in this way. How can I adapt my behavior for a better outcome? And suddenly we're human once again. I'm not fight, flight, freeze. In terms of creativity, this is an interesting one. I felt incredibly stressed a few weeks ago, and I'm looking to find out what is going on. Why am I feeling this way? And it turned out that for an entire week, I'd been doing admin and boring stuff, which is necessary from time to time. But I was feeling way more stressed than usual. There's this low level anxiety buzzing in my life, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And I realized I haven't been creative once this week. I haven't done a podcast. I haven't done any designs. I haven't done any writing. So I stopped everything. I dedicated 2 hours to writing a blog post, and I got into deep flow. I was creative. It was a number of ideas that I'd been thinking about and ruminating on for some time, pulled it together, published it, made a nice banner for the blog post, and I felt so much better. So I realized I hadn't been creative for an entire week. And by reactivating my actions, my behaviors in alignment with what's important, I felt a whole lot better.
Brad, it's difficult to take advice from an obese fitness trainer. It's difficult to take advice from a broke financial counselor. But being obese and being broke are sometimes very apparent to the eye. And it helps us discern maybe that's not the best person to take advice from. But in the world of personal development, resilience, and values, there isn't a way to really judge, rate from the not so great. And at the end of the day, I personally follow people who have a certain type of energy, who seem to be living their life a certain way that I can look up to. You, my friend, are one of those people. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to trust. Who do I trust is giving me the right information? And trust comes from honesty. In a world where click titles and baby sentences gets views, sometimes honest, truthful facts, plain and boring. But sometimes it's these facts that actually end up changing lives, while those clickbaity titles and catchphrases are just a moment of satisfaction and happiness. Thank you for doing the work you do. You have a podcast of your own that I highly recommend. It's called the Brad Hook Podcast that I highly recommend people listen to, because if you enjoyed this podcast, there is hundreds of hours of similar conversations Brad has had with experts around the field where he has discussed all of this, brought the same energy, brought the same truthfulness, brought the same honesty. Thank you for being on the show.
Mark, thank you for being on the Brad Hook podcast. Everyone go and check out that episode because it's one of my favorites.
Thank you, Brad.